Thanks for sticking around. We got two more really very critical sessions, and this is very important. There are actually two versions of this session. One is today about smart cities, tomorrow about intelligent transportation, which Jeff and I have been working for last several years. And for this specific session, we wanted to talk about how can we ensure that the surrounding that we live in and that we kind of grow in, and our children grow, they have a safer future, right? With that kind of background, I'll quickly introduce or just name, and then you can do a quick introduction. Jeff, why don't you start with you, and then we'll go down.
My name is Jeff Davis. I work for BlackBerry. I'm the global head of smart transportation innovation and development. And that's a really fancy title for me to say that I basically go around the world trying to figure out how we're actually going to develop the next stage of mobility. That goes far beyond an autonomous vehicle and an electric vehicle. It goes far beyond a connected train and connected infrastructure. It goes into how it is all of you use mobility. I heard a lot of things in the last discussion. Things were brought up about autonomous vehicles. Things were brought up about Uber and Lyft, rideshare companies that would be there. These have become a part of how we get from point A to point B. Earlier today, and I thought it was great, one of the things that was pointed out is how something like transportation in a city, how much of a difference it makes for equity. We talk about being a country of people that can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's hard to pull yourself up by a bootstrap if you can't get to a place where you can even buy the boots, right? So transportation becomes, or should become, a great equalizer. And right now it's not. In places like New York City, where they are actually fairly progressive, there's still problems with people getting to work. And we're seeing this play out in cities around the world. So that's just a quick introduction of what we look at with smart cities.
Neil, thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Gonaguntla. I'm the president of the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce here in Dallas. We work across a number of different spaces, including professional development, business development, and economic development. And personally, I work in workforce development and education through nonprofits that I serve with. So my perspective in this conversation is maybe more the big picture thinking and how cybersecurity plays a role in that or is a layer over that. So,
thank you, Neil. Dr. Dantu.
I'm Ram Dantu. I'm actually a professor in University of North Texas, and I'm also director of cybersecurity there. I have been involved in 3 to 4 initiatives. One is that when I was a visiting professor in MIT 3 years ago, and I'm still there, and as a visiting, and also that one is more involved with something called Cloud Car. We're working on initiative on that. Basically, it is more about safety as well as efficiency of the car, and the electric or non-electric. That's one initiative. Of course, the congestion and other traffic problems are involved in that. The second one is that I'm actually working with Professor Henning Suzerain from Columbia University, and we have got a lot of grants on emergency services for the smart city, more on the 911 services, as well as emergency departments. Recently, we actually worked with the city of Plano, city of Frisco, to testing some of our software. And this is the third initiative, again, with MIT I'm working, is a future workforce. This is very interesting because as the artificial intelligence and all other things are working, how is the future worker is going to look like? How many jobs are we going to lose? And how are we going to create something different that actually we can create more jobs in that area? So it's very controversial area, but we're working something called future workforce. So I think this is very important for smart cities.
Thank you. And I just also want to bring this to the point that, right after this, we'll have a small presentation around the safety part of it, which will, Meena is going to prepare and present. And I think, let's start with you, Jeff. In terms of, you work on mobility, and mobility is kind of the lifeline and blood of cities, right? And any nation and anywhere you see. Where do you see the security component, the privacy component coming off just that discussion previously, right? Where do you see you in that overall bigger picture of mobility connecting the cities?
I think actually, when you start with the last conversation that happened up here, I think that's a very important place to start, where the idea of the consumer actually choosing what they want out of privacy. When Stanford commencement speech this year, the CEO of Apple Computers stood up and basically gave a speech that we should not in any way presuppose that the cost of technology is our privacy. And he talked about the grand dangers of that, right? When we start giving up pieces of our privacy little by little, we start giving up little pieces of what it means to be human. He talked about, every errant thought that comes across, everything that you want to know just on a wild moment, you then start to begin to be judged on. You just stop thinking a little bit every day. You stop trying a little bit every day. You stop pushing the envelope a little bit every day because it becomes dangerous. I think that gets even worse when you start talking about transportation. There has been a single unifying thought with just about every transportation professional. Whether they work for a private company or a public entity, they believe that a part of their job is to protect lives. People go in cars and go incredible speeds in cars. Those cars have failures, it costs lives. Trains, same thing. You start looking at the way that engineers who develop these things look at these things, and that is a big piece of what they see. And the technologies that they've pushed and developed over the years that actually become that lifeblood, that connection that makes a smart city. Because you can move as many ones and zeros across pipes as you want to, until you can move goods and services across that city effectively to add to those ones and zeros, it means nothing. So we're hitting the age where we're actually able to do that at a rate we've never been able to do that before. And everybody who's involved in transportation and mobility wants to make sure that it is done safely. Well, most people do. Some people are still going for money grabs, but the reality is the vast majority of people involved in this industry want safety. You should not have to give up your privacy or have an expectation that you have to give up your privacy to save your life. We'll have a discussion tomorrow, and so I don't want to talk too much about it today, about connected vehicle technologies, what's out there and what's available for it. When that was built, when that system was built, it was literally built so that you could not trace or track an individual vehicle across space and time. The whole thing was designed so that you could not pull telemetry data from it. And that's absolutely vital in my mind. That's the way we should be looking at this. We should start from a point of view, from private industry's point of view. It's not about taking the data from our people. It's about ensuring that our people are safe. And again, their privacy should not be something they give up for them.
Yeah, no, I think, this is going faster than we can probably imagine, right? And the whole momentum towards autonomous vehicles and ride-hailing systems and door delivery and all that, I think is great. But and I think that's where the next, the overall picture of the way we are building our communities, right? Small businesses and together. What is your thought around the Chamber of Commerce? You engage with small businesses probably more than anybody else.
So, I mean, there are a lot of different ways of looking at things. When we think of the value of data and privacy, this isn't a new idea. The US Census has been collecting our data for as long as, I guess, the census has been around. And people have built models over that data. They've taken other data sets, built models over that. And we make all kinds of decisions based on that data. And you can argue that you can randomize the data and anonymize the data, and that protects people's privacy. But at a fundamental level, when you're living in a neighborhood where everyone is more or less similar to you from a socioeconomic standpoint and education standpoint, however you want to look at it, there is a degree of privacy that's still lost, even if you've anonymized the data. And the choices that corporations or cities or other people make is still impacted by that anonymized data in the aggregate. So I don't think this idea of data privacy is new, or that we've been impacted by it in some new way. I think it's just happening at a faster pace, and we're much more aware of it because every time we sign into a new app, we're clicking that I'm giving up my right to privacy or whatever. So it's much more obvious. But where Capital One decided to put its campus in Plano is not random. It picked a spot based on labor analytics. It picked a spot based on a number of other things to decide where it was going to do business. And I think all of that is based on somebody on some level giving up that privacy along the way to the data on their educational background, their training, their whatever it is. So I don't think this is new.
I just want to give one simple hint. How many people here have seen their data logs from their phone records? Like every month you get the phone bill. How many people actually have seen their data logs? Yeah, I see. If you actually look into more closely the data logs and the kind of applications you do, the kind of travel you do, there's a lot of correlation. That's what we found out. So even simple data logs, not the call logs, using that, there's a lot of information that can be gathered. Forget about any location privacy, those kind of things. Of course, they're more than to that. So there's a lot of issues involved with the simple data tracking actually kind of thing. So how much data is used in particular place. So that gives you a lot of information.
Okay. So please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one piece on the small business because you brought up small businesses. I think one of the challenges with that small businesses face is that data has become so expensive to buy. And so anytime anyone's building a new concept, a new idea, they have to pay an exorbitant amount for that data now to draw conclusions, write algorithms, do whatever. And that is a new barrier to entry for businesses. It's not something that we're hearing a lot about at the chamber, but you can extrapolate that just from the cost of things and looking at other barriers to entry for businesses. But this is something that's definitely a new challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it is also a resiliency challenge, right? I mean, when they have these data loss events, right, how do they bounce back? It's definitely more difficult for a small business to recover once they have some things. And I'll get to that. But I just wanted to also quickly introduce Meena Levine here. I couldn't wait for her to wait for the small presentation. I think she has a say here, being part of the Smart Exchange. We'll do a quick presentation, but Meena, why don't you talk about what you're doing, and then
So good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite. So I'm Mina Levine, I'm the founder of Smart Community Exchange. We have about 10,000 organizations, 2.5 million executives in our network. What we do, and we have been doing since 2006, is we have been supporting smart city leaders when it comes to technology transfer and recommending technologies. The reason why I'm here when it comes to cybersecurity is that since we have been involved with the smart city projects, we learned that there is a lot of opportunities, but there's also a lot of risks. And when it comes to technologies that we have implemented in partnership with the communities, many of these technologies were developed for fast commercialization without thinking about safety and security. And we realized that there is huge opportunities for enterprises and organizations to partner and educate communities about opportunities, risks, and when it comes to cyber. Today we are talking about cyber risk, and of course that's very essential when it comes to smart communities. We have 200 communities in Europe and 200 communities here in the US, plus internationally. We collaborate to share best practice and lessons learned when it comes to safety and security. And I was very blessed to grow up in Scandinavia, where we are very high tech. I moved to the US 33 years ago, and in early 90s, I was traveling around and sharing about how to market on the internet. Now, this was early 90s, and we didn't even discuss about threats when it comes to man-made threats or natural threats related to our infrastructure when it comes to internet. So what we have done during the past years, since 2015, we have been working with smart community leaders to implement smart learning environments, to educate citizens from classrooms, K-12 classrooms, to boardrooms about cybersecurity and community resilience issues. And what we have done is we have impacted by building resilience simply through education, smart education, and building resilience in partnership with the government agencies, educational institutions, enterprises, and organizations. And I was so inspired today to listen to these educational institutions from K-12, vocational and higher education, how they want to be involved and educate these individuals, because as we know, government has about 60,000 openings when it comes to cybersecurity that we can't fill. So we as enterprises and organizations need to collaborate to make sure that our educators know from K to 12 how to start educating the children to the jobs that they adopt 20 years from now. And that is the biggest challenge in our communities. So what we are doing is we are supporting educators from K to 12, vocational to higher education, so that they have the resources they need to build safety and security in our communities through education. And at the end, I will just show you a solution which is based on executive order by Trump administration that every school has to have a safety plan. So we have developed a solution for schools in partnership with the 100 schools, 2,500 educators, and 40,000 students. And we are now officially launching this platform for educational institutions and communities in the state of Texas to celebrate National Cybersecurity Month.
Great. I mean, school safety, can you think about a community and a smart city or any future without school safety? I don't think so. So I think, just can't wait to have this issue, have a tangible and objective solution. I think, in this panel, we see two kind of representation. One is the technology community, and then there's the actual user community, right? So Jeff, if I move from, how can we connect the two in terms of what you're rolling out? Again, BlackBerry has evolved in such a different way with the acquisition of Silence now in cyber and all that. So tell us a little bit about how you're advanced rolling and preparing this community.
Actually, so that's an interesting thing that you mentioned there, where you talked about how does it fit, how do we take the technology and how does it fit into working with human beings, the user side of the whole thing. And one of the things we did with the purchase of Cylance is, I think when we purchased Cylance, we not only got Cylance as a product, we also got about 150 data scientists, which after cybersecurity is probably the second, hardest to fill jobs that are out there, right? So they both have 0% unemployment. So go figure out how you figure it out from zero. But it's, and we took a methodology with it. And actually, there was something else that was discussed in the last panel, which was this concept of, this concept of how to, where can technology actually help us when we're looking towards, dealing with the technology we have. And that's actually part of where we've looked at AI. And we've looked at it from two different sides. We've looked at how does AI enhance the human experience. So specifically looking at cars, for example. Does everybody in the room know the difference between a level 4 vehicle and a level 5 vehicle? Level 4 vehicle and I've never been told I'm too quiet. Never once, like never once. A level 4 and a level 5 vehicle. Show of hands if you know them. So there's 5 levels of vehicles and for autonomy, right? And a level 2 vehicle is what you're used to probably buying if you went out to go buy a new car right now. Lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control allows you to press cruise control and just keeps pace with the car in front of you. So that's about a level 2 vehicle. You can possibly even go into a level 3. A level 4 and a level 5 vehicle are basically fully autonomous vehicles. What makes them different is a level 5 vehicle can work any place, anywhere. It's supposed to be as good as a human being. And believe it or not, as much as human beings cause a lot of crashes, we're actually pretty good drivers. When you look at the number of hours that we put out there and the number of crashes that we actually get per hour. But that said, a level 5 vehicle, for anybody who understands how artificial intelligence works, is a pretty difficult thing to get to. And predictions, depending on who you're talking to, can go from 10 years to 50 years, depending on how cynical the person is. But level 4 is here right now. Make no mistake about it. If you look at what Waymo's been advertising with their taxis they've been running in Arizona, that is a level 4 vehicle. And all level 4 means is that it can only work in a particular operational domain. It's restricted to the domain it can work. And that domain can be geofenced. That domain also has to do with complications that can be thrown into it. So one of the things that we look at with where AI systems can fit into this is in that aspect of it. How can the driver interact with that car? How does the car interact with the driver? How does the system around the car, the city around the car, as we're pulling data from traffic lights, from traffic signals, when does a particular intersection become too complex of an intersection for a level 4 vehicle to, or for that particular vehicle to work through? And how early do we alert the driver? Okay? And I'll tell you how this all goes into cybersecurity in a second, but then there's the machine-to-machine interaction. Right now, when you get a car, it goes through about 2 years of testing. Everything that's on that car goes through about 2 years of testing. And the auto manufacturers are very cautious about what they allow you to then add onto that car later on. Everything else is locked down, right? It's very hard to break into that for very good reason. So everybody has a smartphone in the room, right? If you put an app on your phone and that app interacts poorly with your operating system, what happens? Anybody give me an answer? Yeah, your computer locks up, right? Shuts down. I mean, your phone locks up and shuts down. It's an inconvenience at worst, right? It's just something that kind of can ruin your day pretty well. If you're waiting for an Uber, it can get really bad if you can't find your Uber. But it can be a real pain in the neck. Try to do that in a car going 70 miles an hour. All of a sudden, the entire operating system shuts down because of an application that you put onto the car. Now there's an issue there. And the way that we're looking at how cars will work is they're becoming more and more computers on wheels. So consumers are going to demand to be able to put their own applications onto the car. So those interactions that happen right there. So even without getting into malicious software and cybersecurity in and of itself, breaking into the car, just the simple challenges that happen with APIs that aren't working hand in hand with one another causes a problem. And so that's where another place where we believe that that was, as we looked at Cylance, where we thought we could go with it.
Okay, great. So, in kind of closing that, getting the hook here, what are your thoughts in terms of expectations? So I'll move to Neil, you. Um, I mean, how do we hold the technology providers accountable? I mean, when do we need look at scaling back on the data, on the privacy side, and on the usage? I mean, what is the accountability you would expect from this technology providers?
I think, I think the American in me says that's a question left up to the electorate. You know, I think everybody comes down in a different place on that. If you ask my husband, who sits on the bleeding edge of technology, he'll say, give up my privacy. I want to see what it can do. And if you ask somebody like me, who's more conservative, a lawyer by training, I'll say, I'm not willing to give up my privacy for that. I'm not going to download that app if I have to give them this much information. So I think, you know, it really comes down to what does a given community or a state or a country want? And I think the electorate has to collectively make that decision. I think that the safeguards that companies take, I think one of the panelists in the earlier panel said, you know, tech companies can innovate themselves and fix the problems if you give them enough time. And I think tech companies are going to have to do a really good job of trying to convince people that they can innovate in order to keep the electorate on their side. Because I think if we have more breaches like Equifax, people are going to say, no, you don't know how to handle my data, and I'm not willing to give you the opportunity to try. So I think it's an education piece and sales pitch, really. And they have to be responsible. They have to act responsibly and build the trust with the customer.
Yeah, and I actually think it goes back to something that was said earlier in the day as well. There was a comment made about how cheap it is to hold data. And companies have to start making decisions about what they're doing with their data and how long they're holding data, and why they need that data. You know, I mean, to build an AI system takes an enormous amount of data. Sorry, the Massachusetts almost came out at me there. Sorry, I'm trying to hold it back. But yeah, it takes a lot of data to do that.
Yeah.
And but you have to then determine what you need and what you don't need, and how long you're going to keep that data. Holding on to data and allowing it to sit there just to be breached, which is what you're doing, is a big part of the problem. And when you start talking, one thing I will disagree with you on, the challenge of looking into smart cities, when you look at the sensor systems, everything that's coming into play, your ability to actually opt out is really not there. You know, if you go to the city of London right now, you are being filmed on almost every step you take.
Corner, yeah.
Right? So the only way to opt out is just don't go to London. Like that's legitimately where you are with it. And so that comes with a heavy responsibility. And I think that's something we have to understand, not just as private companies, but as governments as well.
Just quick thought. I know he mentioned about the applications locking up. Think about this in these automated autonomous vehicles coming out of the road. How many insurance companies are prepared to insure the car, and what does it cost? How to insure this cars? So that is one of the, because I have been talking to National Transportation Safety, CTO of that one. We have been working on some other project. So one of the things he is actually always suspecting is that about the insurance for the cars. Who is going to do this insurance? Well, was number one. Number two is that when the last stage of any abnormalities and any crashes kind of thing, you have to leave the autonomy to the vehicle, electronics. That's the only way you can actually save your life. That's what the overall, because in the split second, you can't make actions. Only the electronics can make action actually. So there are a couple of things you have to think about in these things.
Great. So I'd like to close this now. We're down, and then turn to Meena as we switch out this panel. Dr. Dan to stay with us. And as we switch this panel, Mina, you want to start the presentation?
Yes. So I wanted to finish this smart city discussion about just making sure that we understand smart technology is to improve the quality of life for individuals. That's what smart is. There is going to be risks. So we do have to educate the individuals that are using these smart technologies, our communities, how to build resilience. And it starts with individuals. Of course, the benefits of smart technology is to save resources, time, money, and so forth. But at the end, the individual is the weak link. So what did we do after several years of research, meetings with the governments in Europe as well as in the US? We discussed how are we going to start build cyber resilience in our US communities. The only way that you can do that, not from top down, but from bottom up. So we created a community initiative based on cyber education, and I would like to show you this presentation. I wasn't planning to show that, but since we are here, I will tell you what this is all about. Smart Safety and Security S3 program is going to be launched today in Texas, state of Texas. We have already launched it around the country. Smart Education Exchange is the one which is managing this program, and we invested about $3 million to develop the platform as well as the program. It supports our communities, but it starts with administrators, school resource officers, and our public safety officers. The partnership, we are partnering with communities across the US as well as enterprises and organizations to make sure that our educators and public safety officers get the education and skills training and retraining they need to use smart technologies to protect our people and communities. Problem is that they don't understand how to create a safe environment. So we are educating them about how to digitize and use smart technology to protect themselves as well as communities, as well as create safe school plans, which are in the executive order from the Trump administration. These schools don't understand how to do it. So we have created a digital tool that they can adapt through our smart learning environment. And in this way, they can start sharing information, educating their school staff as well as communities to, again, build the resilience from the bottom up. We offer at no cost implementation workshops, so it's not information, it's how to implement smart safety and security in schools. Thank you very much. We look forward to collaborating with all of you.
Great job. When was the last time you said 2-minute presentation that captures everything? So thank you. This has been a great panel. I'm sure there is lots of digging down that we're going to do. And everyone is here this evening, so please feel free to connect.
Can I leave you with one thought
Of course.
in terms of the progress that we're making? When I was in middle school and we had computer access to Excel and Word and things like that, our login password that was generated by the school was actually our social security number.
Oh, yes.
So, if you think about how far we've evolved from, I learned my social security number that way, but how far we've evolved from, the risks of cybersecurity to the awareness of it, I think we'll get there and it'll be a continuum, but, we'll progress through that, but.
We'll go from there, using social security user ID to passwordless, right? That's where we're going to go to.